You know why I'm afraid for the calendar, Pat?
Why?
Its days are numbered. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage, a mostly fantasy football podcast. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And Pat, this doesn't happen often. And when it does, it's usually during the season where our show gets a little bit turned on its head right before. I go through all day planning out what we're going to talk about today. Had some nice topics, obviously March Madness reactions. We're going to talk about UConn and their eulogy. Some quarterback stuff, whatever moves have happened. And then within 30 minutes of our show starting, not one but two major NFL transactions.
Two of the bigger moves in the last week or at least week or so, right?
Which is hilarious. And I'm not here to complain because it could have happened 2 hours from now, and I would have been thoroughly pissed. So I'm glad it happened before the show, and forced us to adjust so we can at least talk about it. So, folks, today on the show we will be talking about every major, latest NFL transaction. So we're going to go over obviously the quarterback carousel, some other moves that happened, some draft intel that we're hearing about, and then we will get into some March Madness reactions. We've also got a draft that we're going to do, Pat and I, going back and forth on the biggest fantasy football beneficiaries of the offseason so far.
And the number one pick might have just
changed because of the news that just happened. So, Pat, let's get into it because we have some
breaking news.
And that breaking news is Russell Wilson signing with the New York Giants on, I believe, a 1-year, $21 million deal, about 10 of it guaranteed. This kind of turns some things on its head here because what we were heading into the show expecting to talk about and expecting to do, and what inspired, the fantasy football beneficiaries draft, and it'll still be apt to do because we should take a look at the offseason as a whole. But what was inspiring it was the potential rise and just to the moon rocket for Malik Neighbors.
Was about to be insane, man.
As a result of Jameis Winston being signed to the Giants, which has also happened since we last spoke to you guys here on Brand Coverage. Jameis had signed a 2-year, $8 million deal. But now, Pat, any reasonable, logical person will look at this Russell Wilson deal as they signed him to be the starter. This is a lot more money than Jameis is getting, significantly. Again, 1 year, $21 million, 10 guaranteed versus 2 years, $8 million for Jameis. A little bit of cold water on the Neighbors thing. Not so much in I dislike him for fantasy next year because Neighbors was really good with whatever gaggle fuck quarterbacks he had last year. And Russ does still have some left in the tank. I'm not saying he's dust. We were just mouth-watering over the idea of having the literal most gunslingerist quarterback in the league possibly throwing to Malik Neighbors. So how are you feeling right now, Pat? What was your reaction?
That's the thing. Like you say, first of all you need to have in the tank to be an upgrade from the Giants last year is anything.
Right.
If you are any kind of quarterback, it's better than the situation. And again, you look at it, objectively speaking, who is the better real-life quarterback right now? It's Russell Wilson.
Yes,
obviously, that's why he's been starting. But the Giants are going to be bad no matter what here. They are clearly in a position where they can get, maybe get a nephew Arch next season potentially. So it was going to be a tough road for Giants fans no matter what, but if Jameis was there, man, it was going to be fun. It was going to be absolutely ridiculous. He would have been running for his life out there, and he would have chucked the ball like crazy to exclusively Malik Neighbors.
Pretty much.
He would have had some nice 500-yard, 6-touchdown, 7-interception games.
Right.
In a 83-52 loss. And it was just going to be phenomenal, and now it is going to be painfully boring. Now you have to be bad and not enjoy it anyway. If you're a Giants fan and, at least you're out there, Jameis is a disaster and everything, and he's just slinging it, at least you got something to laugh or smile at throughout the game.
Right.
This just screams like we saw what Russ did in Pittsburgh, and it's being capable, but it's nothing spectacular. And there is the upside in this offense as a whole goes down a good amount. But, we'll talk about it more. I obviously, Neighbors still to the moon, genuinely, but it's just not quite as astronomical as it might have been.
To me, it's just Neighbors is on the same rocket that he's been since last season. Like
Exactly.
Malik Neighbors is very clearly a talent that is ascending into that absolute tier 1 of NFL wide receivers if he's not already there, at least for fantasy purposes. That's how much he showed last year. But yeah, I think, Pat, the Jameis discussion was going to be an interesting one to have, and honestly, I'm a little bit upset that we don't get to have a discussion about just what it would look like with just Jameis, because I think it was an interesting one, because it also, as much as I was like, yes, Neighbors to the moon with Jameis as his quarterback, it also wasn't going to be that simple, because I think, A, we expected that they would probably draft a guy. This is assuming they signed Jameis and didn't sign Russ. We would have expected they would go into the draft, sign a guy, maybe start the season with Jameis, and Jameis is one of those classic type of guys that we talk about on the show all the time that is, again, more beneficial for fantasy purposes than he is for real life. So it was one of those things where Malik Neighbors may have a quarterback that allows him to go to the moon because Jameis is just chucking, but you also, I think we would have had to head into next season also aware that Jameis probably wasn't going to make it through the whole season if they have a rookie quarterback on tap, because Jameis just isn't the type of quarterback that makes it through full seasons. He just doesn't play well enough on a 17-game sample in real life terms to hold on to that job for a full season. It just wasn't going to happen.
And especially, like I said, as bad as the team is likely to be, the quarterback is the easiest scapegoat. It would have been such an easy benching. But I also feel like that's still the case here with Russ potentially, having a very short leash, because you have a capable backup in Jameis who, is probably one of the top 3 or 4 backups in the league right now, rather than Drew Lock and Tony Pasta or whatever the fuck the guy's name was.
Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito is there. They signed him as well.
God, I wish Italians were real. But shout out if anyone if you're listening in Italy right now in the chat, you're jumping, Mamma Mia. But
God, the odds of that are slim and or none. But
unlike me, they are slim. But I think what this also kind of indicates is the fact that the Giants. It seems like these two quarterbacks, Ward and Shador, are going to go 1-2, because why else would the Giants go all in on 2 established quarterbacks? Why would they bring in one of the top rookies as well? And with Tennessee seeming to be zoning in on Cam Ward, a trade seems incredibly unlikely, or just too high of an asking price. So not only do I think this is very telling not only about the Giants but also the Titans and the Browns, what their quarterback situations are going to be like.
Yeah, the Russ going to the Giants situation, again, as it pertains to fantasy, Neighbors is fine. I think Neighbors is a perfectly valid still, later first-round pick. I think with Jameis and a rookie, I could have maybe talked myself into like a couple spots higher just because of the crazy weekly upside he would have with Jameis being willing to throw the ball at any fucking time, any fucking where. But yeah, now with Russell Wilson signing here, looking at this from a Giants perspective, it's a pretty fucking weird move, Pat. I don't really understand it, because you've got Joe Shane, Brian Daboll, guys who were on the hot seat at the end of the year and who owner John Mara basically...
Hot,
yeah, they are. Well, John Mara basically reaffirmed, we're going to keep these guys around. We like the direction they're heading, but we all know that doesn't necessarily mean anything beyond this year. And so this year, we all very much assume that this was a prove it year, figure out how to hold on to your jobs kind of year, and that was a really tough spot to be put in. At the same time, they don't seem to be doing themselves any favors. Now, again, we're not inside the building. We don't know how much influence is coming from the front office to make some of these, or not the front office, but ownership to make some of these moves potentially. But from a perspective of these guys are trying to hold on to their jobs, I don't understand what they're doing, because I think you had to pick a different direction. Either, and again, this would hinge on if Aaron Rodgers actually wanted to be a Giant, right? I think either you have to go get Aaron Rodgers because he is the best win now option. Now, I'm not saying he's a good win now option necessarily on the market, because this quarterback free agent class just isn't great. It very rarely ever is. But I think if you're trying to say we're going to put together a contender because that's what ownership wants to see, that's how we're going to keep our jobs, I think you go get Aaron Rodgers. On the flip side, you can get a rookie quarterback and try to convince ownership, okay, this is the guy. You can't expect us to be great with him in year 1. We need some time to develop him, at least 2 years to see what he's got. Then maybe you can hold on to your job that way. You sign Russell Wilson and make your quarterback room Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Pat, I don't know how any logical person looks at the New York Giants quarterback room of Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and says, yeah, that's going to go well. That's going to make that team good. What are we doing?
That's the thing. Like, I guess maybe option 3 in that scenario could be, just have Jameis flat out suck, have a top pick, and then say, kind of like a Matt Eberflus situation, hey, give us a chance with this elite rookie quarterback in 2026. But with that, with this Russ move, I just can't see it happening unless they massively, massively exceed expectations this year. Like, I saw people being like, when Jameis, it's like, this is going to be the most fun 7-10 team you've ever seen. And I'm like, 7?
7? Yeah.
They'd be lucky to get 4. Like,
Right.
they'd be the most fun 4-13 team I've ever seen. It's like, how, like, even though Russ is a better real life quarterback, how much better is it going to be? Like, this is a move that a front office would make when they know they're sitting ducks instead of like you said, actively formulating a plan. How can we stay? How can we build this team and also continue to be a part of this build?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. You're right, and just more so, it sucks. Like, it's just not fun. Like, we want to have girls just want to have fun, and we're not having fun now because of Russ.
It just strikes me as a limbo purgatory move, and
Exactly
something where they're going to enter this season, and like we all know how this season's going to play out. Their Giants are going to rotate these guys at quarterback, or Russ is going to play most of the year, and they're going to go 4-13 or 5-12, and everyone's going to get fired, and it's going to be like, okay, why did we need to waste that whole season to see that happen? We could have just gotten a head start on the reset and either cleaned house earlier in the offseason. Obviously, you can't do it now. Or drafted a young quarterback to try to get somebody on board here. Now, I guess you could argue that there's nobody that they're enamored with maybe outside of Cam Ward. Like, it seems most of the league feels that way. So maybe they don't feel that their quarterback of the future is available. At the same time, I think you got to try. I think you got to throw a dart. I'm not saying you have to.
3?
I'm not saying you have to burn the number 3 overall pick. But the way they're signing these quarterbacks doesn't really tell me they're gonna draft one. Period. Like, I don't know if you had signed. If you had signed Russell Wilson, no, I guess signing him out of order wouldn't have changed anything. Signing both these guys, period, it tells me you have 2 quarterbacks you're planning to keep on your roster next year. DeVito, I don't care. He said it's like a 1-year, $1 million contract. You get rid of.
If they had just had Tommy DeVito as if Tommy DeVito's the lone backup to
Yeah.
either Jameis or Russ, you could see them, using a 3rd or 4th round pick.
Yeah, but it's like with these 2 guys, and I understand, they haven't committed a lot of money to Jameis, but I don't know why you commit any money to Jameis if you're planning for him to be effectively your QB3 behind Russ and a rookie, or at least if you're planning to have Russ and a rookie also on the roster. It's very weird moves. I am waiting to see if they can make it make sense, but it just seems like I'm overthinking it and, overlooking the fact that bad teams stay bad, and the Giants are just going to keep being bad for a little bit until they have a bit harder of a reset, because whatever they're doing right now is weird. I don't see a way that it works out for them, this strategy. Like, you sign 2 below average, I think, at this point, quarterbacks, and expect to have a winning season. I don't really know how that works. There's
no way they're expecting that. There ain't no way.
No, but then it's like, what the fuck are you doing this season? So weird moves from the Giants. We went from super hyped about Jameis to super ew as it relates to Russ signing with them. And now there's really only one more major free agent quarterback domino to fall. We'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins. With Kirk Cousins, if he gets moved at any point. But Aaron Rodgers is the last domino to fall. The Giants obviously are no longer an option for him with these signings. They could theoretically still draft a guy, I guess, but signing another quarterback. Imagine they just bring in Rodgers too. Rodgers, Russ, and Jameis. God, put that fucking team on Hard Knocks immediately. Rodgers obviously is out of the question for the Giants at this point, which really only leaves the Steelers, and then theoretically, the Titans or Browns, but nobody's been talking about them because they're just gonna probably draft guys. So it looks like it's Steelers or bust. Rodgers did meet with the Steelers a couple days ago, and it seems like they're kind of just keeping that door open. What a surprise. Rodgers is kind of keeping them on his timeline is what it seems like, because now with Russ off the market here, Pat, the Steelers are either going to sign Aaron Rodgers or actually go into next season with Mason Rudolph as their starting quarterback. Yikes. Big yikes.
I was talking to my cousin who's a Steelers fan just before this, and he's basically like, who's the quarterback? I'm like, I guess it's Mason Rudolph. And it's so puzzling. First of all, that is, if I had to predict it right now, I predict that Rodgers is not there. When we did our kind of QB destination, I had him on the couch. And I'm still going to have him on the couch as of right now. The main reason being just I just can't see him and Mike Tomlin working with how, Mike Tomlin being, a stubborn mule basically, but just the guy is just to the point. He's got a system, a 9-7 system or whatever that works every year.
Yep.
And I would see them clashing. He wouldn't put up with his bullshit. And I think Rodgers' ego is so big that he needs someone to put up with his bullshit. Like, that's out of the question. But now looking at it from a football perspective, it's just so bizarre because they have a great defense. They are so well coached, and the offense right now looks like diarrhea. Like, you have George Pickens, who's a freak athlete and had a good year last year, and you bring in DK Metcalf as well, who may not be at the peak of his game anymore, but still a really good receiver. To have Mason Rudolph throw to him with no real running back situation happening there is, well, obviously, more than likely they're going to draft one.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
And again, this isn't a situation where, they're drafting a quarterback. You'd say, like, oh, they'll draft someone. It's like, who? Like, yeah, they may draft someone in the mid-rounds, but it's like, is he going to be better than Mason Rudolph? Who knows, maybe. But I'd say at least unlikely. It's like, what are they doing? Like, they are gonna win like 8 or 9 games, but it
Mason Rudolph, I'm not even sure.
I think
get there.
just with that,
I know
team,
they always get there,
but that's what I mean. I just think with everything around them, and I think that it could be, they're gonna run the ball with whoever Arthur Smith decides. Michael Pruitt, put him in the backfield, but yeah, it's just very confusing, and a team that's kind of mired in mediocrity that doesn't. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. But again, like the Giants, this just feels like would be just such a kind of a dead fish move. And even getting Rodgers, I don't think would make them a whole lot better. Like, yeah, but better than Rudolph. But it's just, I'm surprised that they're the last domino to fall here. I figured they kind of would have gotten ahead of it, especially the fact that they had 2 guys on that team last year in Russ and Fields that they had a relationship that they easily could have went and brought back. So the fact that they're kind of the last team standing here is just, I don't know. I think I might even be more perplexed at what they're doing than what the Giants are doing.
That's fair, and I think the expecting them to get ahead of it thing at the quarterback position has just not been their MO since Big Ben retired. It kind of just feels like they are, and we got a question about this, a viewer question after we went off air with the audio version last week. It was about how certain teams struggle to like rebuild and some just get kind of stuck in purgatory. It's like the Steelers have been stuck in purgatory almost exclusively because of the quarterback position. They haven't found themselves in a position to draft one high up in the draft. They would have to, because of where they finish every year, trade a lot of assets to get up to a position where they're getting an elite quarterback prospect. Otherwise, they're just hoping to hit on a late round guy like a Dak Prescott or a Russell Wilson with the Seahawks kind of situation. And that just hasn't happened. It kind of feels like the Steelers are just ignoring it and hoping that it gets better. And I don't know that that's the right strategy. It's kind of a weird move on their part. So we'll see what they actually end up doing. I do think, unlike Pat, I do think Aaron Rodgers is going to end up a Steeler. I think the fact that they brought him in for that meeting just kind of tells me there is interest on both sides. And for better or for worse, they're going to realize they need each other. And I think Tomlin will make that personality work whether he wants it to or not. So I think they kind of just have to at this point.
I think if Rodgers does, I think it could be one of those like camp things or even like into the season.
Yeah.
Like I think that I could see that. I mean, I could very well be wrong here and they could go get Rodgers, but it's just like, I don't know. I guess it's just a vibes thing.
I just don't
from
think
my perspective. But
I
if they want to win
imagine
football games, yeah, that's the way to go.
Well, and that's the thing. I can't imagine you trade for DK Metcalf and then say we're okay with having Mason Rudolph as our starting quarterback, unless this is just a case where, I see a lot of the time people criticizing the idea of like fans knowing more than teams or decision makers, and obviously that is most often the case. They fucking don't. But I also think there's an element of like when you are so deep into the day in and day out like minutia of a team. I think sometimes teams and like GMs and front offices can lose touch of just reality, and it's like, are you guys really convincing yourself that Mason Rudolph is like a guy that you can get a good season out of just because you're familiar with him? Obviously, he has that history in Pittsburgh. Maybe they saw what he did with Tennessee and were impressed in the limited action he had over there. But it's like, you can't seriously think Mason Rudolph is a guy that's going to even lead you to your normal 10-7. I don't think that's going to happen. So like, I just wonder, is this a case where they're a little out of touch and just a little, need to take a step back and realize, guys, this is Mason fucking Rudolph. You can't do that.
That's the thing. This was a guy who lost the starting battle to Will Levis last year. And obviously they bring him in over Will Levis. And I mean, he was okay. Well, I don't even know if okay is the right word to put it. He was a warm body out there. He
existed. He was better than Levis.
He wasn't as hilarious as Will Levis
right.
was. Let's just put it that way. Like, you might have not even noticed that he was out there. Like, if you look at, the Titans game, you may not have even noticed Mason Rudolph was out there. You noticed Will Levis was because he was so bad. But, yeah, it's just... It's just a bizarre situation. There's a reason this guy hasn't been a starter, basically, ever in his career. So a team that could theoretically contend in a really good with Baltimore and Cincinnati, who we both expect to be really good this year. And I just don't see this going well unless...
No, in eight games last year, Will Levis had 1,530 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Like, no, that's not going to get it done for a team that is otherwise built to make the playoffs like they are every year. It's like, Pat, does it feel like the Steelers are playing a game of chicken with how bad they can make their quarterback and still make the playoffs? That's kind of what it's starting to feel like to me. It's like they get Kenny Pickett. They're like, oh, he was pretty fucking bad. I think, did they make it with him? I don't even know if they made it with him. That might have been one of their 9-7,
Super
but not
Bowl champion Kenny Pickett.
Shut the fuck up. That might have been one of their 9-7, but not good enough to make the playoff seasons. Because obviously, when you go, or I guess now it's 9-8, but if you go, 9-8, 10-7 every year, you're kind of at the mercy of just how good the other wild card teams are. You're not really staking your claim to a playoff spot. Let me double check. No, I mean they've made the playoffs. They only missed the playoffs once since 2020. So I mean they've made it with Kenny Pickett a couple of times. So like now are they just like, all right, we made it with a combo of reject in the league Justin Fields and washed Russell Wilson. Now can we make it with our own broken toy that we sent somewhere else? And with fucking Mason Rudolph. Like, guys, just send me out there. See if you can win. See if you can get to a playoff game with me out there. I feel like you have the overconfidence that you can at this point. So sign me. I promise I won't cost as much as Aaron Rodgers will. I'll take a fourth of what he would ask for, and I'll be perfectly happy with that.
Just cover my insurance bills after I get literally killed on the first play of the game.
That too. No, you have to build an offensive line so I never get touched. Honestly, that sounds like an actual Rodgers demand, so I won't actually do that. All right, the other big transaction, Pat, that happened right before the show, and I thought the Russ deal was going to be enough. And then about 5 minutes later, some news of my own favorite team, the New England Patriots, have addressed the wide receiver position, albeit with a man that's ACL may or may not still be torn. Stefon Diggs, 3 years, $69 million, only $26 million guaranteed. I'm happy because it's a receiver that is good and is not Mac Hollins or Jalen Polk or Kendrick Bourne. I like Mac Hollins, but the other guys can kind of,
Raider legend Mac Hollins slander.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some people say that this is an overpay for Stefon Diggs. Guys, I have some news for you. The Patriots are going to have to overpay to get players to come here. It's called the suck tax. You got to pay it. You have to convince a player to come here versus going to a team that doesn't fucking suck. And how do you do that? With more money. So I'm sure Diggs had offers on the table or was fielding them, and we had to go a little bit above it. I'm not upset at the $26 million guaranteed. And at the end of the day, with how bad the rest of this kind of free agent wide receiver class, look, everybody available was either old, injured, or both. We ended up getting the guy who I think showed the most flashes last year. Both, yes, but showed the most flashes last year out of him, Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett, Brandon Cooks, who recently signed. So I'm happy with it.
Without a doubt, of this kind of group of wide receivers, he's also the closest removed to being a really good receiver.
Right.
Even the first half of last year in Buffalo, the guy was really good. And then I'm sorry, 2 years ago. Last year he was, last year, this past, whatever. It was last year in Buffalo. He was good that first half. And then just died off. So, like, out of all these other guys we've seen, he has been good the most recently. And the Patriots have a lot of money to work with, too, so I guess they have the room to overpay, which, like, you're right. Yeah, it is an overpay. And I think this will be, the thing is, I don't love the deal on the surface just because who knows what this team is going to be like because, again, this is Josh McDaniels' offense again. And we did not see, outside of Randy Moss, really kind of this alpha-type outside wide receiver ever really work. But I think the fact of the matter was that the other guys they had to work with were really fucking good. Like Wes Welker, Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman. You even go further back to like Deion Branch, like that. Yeah, that's really dating ourselves. But now they don't have that other kind of tool they can work with, unless they get like a Travis Hunter, maybe. But so the question just becomes, how does Drake May work in this Josh McDaniels offense, and how do they prioritize a guy like Stefon Diggs, who again isn't going to be like this tippity top of the league wide receiver,
right?
But should still be classified as a good player who deserves a 3-year deal. And we saw him in Houston look good at times, but they were getting creative for him. Like I remember he had like a jet sweep touchdown. They were trying to get him the football. It's like, is something like that gonna happen in this Josh McDaniels offense? Like from a real life perspective, it's like, yes, you've got a good veteran wide receiver, but like in terms of fantasy, I am not particularly moved.
Yeah, I get that. Again, real life perspective, like I'm not even viewing Diggs as this, big name outside sort of receiver. He hasn't really been an outside receiver the last couple of years. It's more of a, intermediate to short route kind of guy. I am simply viewing it as a guy who has functional hands that can catch passes for Drake May, that can get open and then catch the pass for Drake May, which is literally the lowest bar possible, but it's the bar that we're at here in New England right now because it's just him, and then Mac Hollins is the field stretcher. Like that's a guy who I think every route he's ever run is just a streak up one of the sidelines. So it's funny enough, him and Diggs, we kind of are just stealing the Bills receiver group from like 3 years ago. I'm very happy with it. But fantasy-wise, as with everything, it depends on the price. It's not a guy I'm not over the moon about the outlook for him fantasy-wise like I am about, say, a Devontae Adams, who's another older receiver going to a new place. I think a lot of that is just him coming off the injury and me not being sure what he's going to bring. But, like, if I could get it's a case where we're going to feel like name value alone is probably going to bump the ADP a little too high. But, like, if I could get Diggs as, like, a third or fourth bench spot, like, that would be beautiful because that's low risk, high reward potentially if he's the number one target in this offense, but that feels pretty unlikely. So I'm with you fantasy wise. I'm probably not going to be all that thrilled about it.
That's the thing. In theory, he is a number one receiver on a team that like could be decent. Like I'm not expecting this team to necessarily light it up. I think they'll improve in Drake May's first full year out there. But I'm not seeing this being kind of like, and we talked about it last year, like the example was like Deontay Johnson. It's like, oh, you got to take the number one wide receiver. It's like, if the team is bad, no, you don't. Like, you don't, you don't have to. And that's sort of also how I feel with Diggs. Like, yeah, he may be a number one guy, but it's like, it's for the Patriots. Like, you could say like, oh, well, you want to take Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is in the second year and is a stud. Stefon Diggs is aging, declining, and tore his ACL. Again, still a better
triple threat
than average.
He's a triple threat receiver.
Still a better than average wide receiver, in my opinion. But yeah, it's not something. He is not someone that I want to be drafting to be in my starting lineup.
No, certainly not. I mean, I think that would be the case almost no matter where he went, just coming off in a torn ACL at this age. It's not a guy I'm going to prioritize over probably who else is available there. But as a Patriots fan, I'm thrilled. We need guys who actually have pedigrees, can help our young quarterback develop by giving him, options he can trust. We don't want him to develop all these terrible bad habits because he doesn't trust that anytime he throws the ball, somebody can actually make a fucking play for him. I think we are slowly but surely surrounding him with some playmakers that are at least I would say like above average at their position at the very least. And that's all I can ask for at this point. So we'll see what we do in the draft to support, Stefon Diggs and surround him and Mac Hollins with more guys. Cause like this still isn't enough for me to be confident that Drake May has like a real playground of weapons to work with. So we're going to need to draft a receiver or something in the draft. But this does make me wonder if maybe that's not the plan at number 4. Maybe it's more of the plan in the second round. I would hope if Travis Hunter's available, he's just the easy fucking smash the auto draft button real quick. But if he's not, maybe they put some more thought into it. Maybe they don't feel Tet McMillan is worthy of a number 4 overall pick, which is fine. I've seen back and forth on that.
If you look at it with those 2 quarterbacks and Travis Hunter are off the board, you need to fucking smash the Abdul Carter button.
I know. That's the thing
at 4. Like, who cares? You could have the best defensive ends in the league. You are smashing
the
Abdul
agree.
Carter
button.
The
the concern right now is there are some rumblings of Shador sliding. And so if Shador does not go off the board in the top 3 picks, then we're dicey.
What the fuck are the Browns doing then?
I mean, look, if you don't think the quarterback's the guy, then you don't think he's the guy. Like, this could be a case where, like, it definitely seems like Cam Ward is the top guy in the class, but, like, there have been other classes where we've tried to convince ourselves that other guys are worthy of higher spots than they are, and then all of a sudden it's Kenny Pickett getting drafted 22nd overall, and you're like, oh, that's how NFL teams view this guy. I think we've seen a lot of discourse on both sides about how teams view Shador. And at this point, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he slid, because we also have heard a lot of, we don't know exactly what he does super well that would warrant like a top 5 pick. So I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting. I'm hoping obviously that he goes top 5 or top 3, excuse me. Because that would open things up a lot for the Patriots for sure. Yeah. Some other various moves, as we'll just cover any potentially remotely fantasy relevant transactions that happen throughout the offseason. Pat, my boy, Tyler Conklin signing with the ever tight end needy Los Angeles Chargers. Tyler Conklin gets to go play with Justin Herbert, Pat. I don't know about you. I'm smelling a top 5 tight end season from Tyler. I'm kidding. This is just a mild...
Brother, I was about to disconnect.
This is just a mildly interesting signing because the Chargers used a bunch of different tight ends last year. I don't believe they have... do they still have Will Dissly?
Is Will Dissly still there, I believe?
He is still there. So it'll be a combo of Dissly and Conklin rather than Dissly and our boy Stone Smart, who has gone on to literal greener pastures in New York with the Jets, excuse me. So Conklin's here, he's gonna play, and basically if Dissly dies, then Conklin will be on the fantasy radar. That's pretty much where we're at.
Well, that's the thing, is that Dissly is even kind of more of a blocking tight end. That's why it was kind of a bit.
Oh, so you're saying conk?
Well, potentially, like Will Dissly was fantasy relevant for a few weeks there.
He was
towards the end of the season. So like they could potentially involve Tyler Conklin, and he's just a guy that's just a serviceable, good tight end. Fantasy-wise, I don't know. We're talking streamer situation, but again, a good offense. I guess out of all the places someone like Tyler Conklin could have gone, there is some opportunity here.
Let's see. I'm looking up some Tyler Conklin propaganda and seeing.
No, for the love of God.
Seeing what the streets are saying. One guy I follow said Will Dissly had 4+ receptions in 7 out of 15 games last year. Give those touches to Tyler Conklin, and Los Angeles could be having some fun. I like it, Pat.
He is a better pass catching tight end for sure.
All I'm hearing is conk stonks, baby. We're going all the way up to the moon, baby.
Stonk.
I should have made Conklin the thumbnail of this show. Honestly, I'm disappointed that I didn't. A notably less relevant player than Tyler Conklin. Also, so I'm kidding. He's very much more relevant, and he's going back home. Brandin Cooks signs a 2-year, $13 million deal with the Saints, which is good because it seems like their receiver room is kind of just haunted all the time, and they probably need the injury depth and reinforcements.
Ew.
He's going to be one of the injured players, though, that they need the depth for.
That's possibly true.
Saints, I'm over Brandin Cooks. I have kind of been over Brandin Cooks, but like
he's ready to produce. He's a projected starter, apparently. Yeah, him, Rashid Shaheed, and Chris Olave are the big 3, and Chris Olave is just constantly concussed, and Rashid Shaheed is coming back from a torn something of his own. So, I mean, look. He'll be on waiver articles. I can predict that much. This obviously does nothing for actual draft preparations in terms of fantasy football. But Brandin Cooks going back home. Look, Brandin Cooks is still only 31 years old, Pat. That's old. Who am I kidding? I feel like he's
you
actually,
hate old people.
He's finally getting to Unk status. He'll be 32 in or late September, so in the middle of the season, toward the beginning of the season. But hey, it's happening, and we report on the moves that happen. Brandin Cooks, folks, is a New Orleans Saint 8 years after the Saints traded him to the New England Patriots. And he was pretty good for us, other than the fact that he got blown the fuck up in the Eagles Super Bowl and knocked out of the game.
That was early too.
It was. I mean, that quite literally like swung the game in a huge way. Nothing dirty by Philly or anything like that, but like, not having one of our best pass catchers that whole game was not fun. Some other NFL news and notes. We've alluded to it here a little bit, but there is a report officially from Adam Schefter that the Titans are falling in love, Pat, with Cam Ward. They are starting to fall for Cam Ward more and more. They're going to hold a private workout for him, and it is reported that it would now take an even larger trade package for any team to go up to number one. So the Titans are asking for a large package, Pat, and if they don't get one, they're taking Cam Ward. So I don't know if anybody's going to give them a large package. I certainly don't have one to offer, but the Titans, it seems like, are going to do.
Out of here.
Seems like the Titans are going to do the logical thing, which is take a quarterback because God knows they need one. They have seemingly shown zero interest in any of the free agent quarterbacks, which probably telegraphed this move a little bit. But again, we weren't sure if that was because it was telegraphing that they were maybe going to draft one, or if they were just being stupid and, didn't really fucking care what happened at the position, and they were going to just try to address this maybe in a year or two. But it sounds like Cam Ward to the Titans, and we will see what happens beyond that. After that, the other little piece of news here, Puka Nacua apparently plans to retire at 30. This is just a headline that came up. He casually dropped this in an interview for reference. Puka Nacua is 23 years old, and honestly, okay, this doesn't really do anything. I feel like
when he's at GOAT status by then, he'll keep going.
When Puka Nacua has averaged 2,000 yards a season for the next 8 seasons.
It was funny. I think, Field Yates tweeted, with this Puka Nacua news, everyone should trade him to me in their dynasty leagues. Because who wants a guy that is only going to be around for 7 more years?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's surprised, especially with Puka being one of the more, we hate using this term, but quote, injury-prone receivers that in early, if not retirement, in early decline was probably going to be in his, future with how he plays. I don't think we'd be surprised if he doesn't quite age as gracefully as a Devontae Adams, because it does seem like he's banged up all the fucking time. But that doesn't mean he can't give you 7, 8 really, really good years from now till then. It's also a long time for him to change his mind. I think Tyreek Hill said something similar at one point, that he wanted to retire by 30. And then Tyreek was like, you know what? I actually really like money and need to support my 17 kids by 18 different women. So I hope Puka probably won't have that issue. So maybe he can retire more comfortably at age 30 than Tyreek can. But yeah.
I will say, I don't really have favorite players in sports. I think Puka's my favorite player, non-Raider, in the whole
which is
league.
Which is so funny because of the origin of you with Puka on this show, where we had our buddy Gary come in and he was like, talk about Puka Nacua or something.
And I said, Pat, talk about my nuts or something.
Pat unironically was like, who the fuck are you talking about? And then we would find out about a couple weeks later when Puka lit the league on fire for his rookie
I had
year.
the #1 waiver claim in the league.
You got him, yeah, you got him.
After week 1.
Yeah.
And I've had him 2 years in a row, and I just absolutely love the guy.
Yeah, so Puka planning to retire at 30. If this were any other week, if there was maybe more going on, we probably wouldn't have even fucking talked about this. But folks, welcome to the offseason where, signings of old washed up players and retirement rumors 7 years in advance are what take center stage. It's kind of just where we're at. But we do have some good fantasy analysis to get to here, Pat, because I think the dust has largely settled now from the offseason, especially after today with Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, solidifying whatever fuckery is going to go on in that quarterback room. We can start to analyze who the biggest fantasy football beneficiaries are from the offseason, at least as of right now. This is going to change because of the NFL draft. That's why, personally, I don't really have many running backs on here, because running back, there's a couple.
I've got a few,
on my draft board, because I think that's the position that is maybe the most at risk of guys, maybe seeing more competition for their jobs. And then obviously once the draft happens too, I think we'll see more of these vet free agents sign once teams know what they ended up doing in the draft. Like there are probably some teams out there like, yeah, we'd like to draft a running back. Oh shit, we ended up missing out on all of them. All right, let's sign J.K. Dobbins, and then we'll see how that plays out. But as of right now, these are our biggest fantasy football beneficiaries. These are individual players based on what has happened this offseason. We're going to go back and forth drafting these players. I am going to go first because Pat went first in our March Madness upsets draft, which we will talk about shortly as we get into our March Madness reactions after this segment. But biggest fantasy football beneficiaries of the offseason. Again, the inspiration for this segment was Malik Neighbors, which seemed a lot more fun when it was going to be Jameis, at least for a little while, until maybe a rookie took over. Now it seems like it's going to be Russell Wilson, possibly for the whole season. Because of that, Malik Neighbors' stock really hasn't changed much to me. I don't think he's necessarily benefited much from this offseason so much as his spot maybe got solidified because Russell Wilson's fine, and it gives me optimism that Malik Neighbors can at least be good. Russ supported George Pickens to being a really good fantasy receiver down the stretch last year, so I imagine he can do a lot for Malik Neighbors. Because of that, though, I'm not going to draft Malik Neighbors with the 101. I am going to draft a different second-year LSU wide receiver, and that is Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. lost all of his competition, Pat, this offseason. Christian Kirk is a Houston Texan. Evan Ingram is a Denver Bronco, and they got Liam Cohen as their new head coach, I think he said something in his introductory press conference. I can't remember exactly what it was. Duval. That Liam Cohen, who at this point, we're pretty sure is a pretty smart offensive mind. He's coming in, he's saying all the right things. He's saying we want to get the ball to our best players, namely Brian Thomas Jr. And I think now that Brian Thomas Jr. is on a depth chart that, again, we're talking pre-draft, this could change. It probably will change, but maybe it's more of a day 2 or 3 wide receiver, if anything. As of right now, he's on a depth chart with Gabe Davis and Parker Washington, Pat. Fuck Gabe Davis. That guy fucking blows, and I hate him. Parker Washington I actually like. He's just more of a low-key, he's not going to steal anything notable from Brian Thomas Jr. Then they've also got Brenton Strange, who I like him too, but this is more... This is more about they have one clear alpha, better than everyone else on that roster, wide receiver, and they did nothing this offseason except get rid of the only other players who got meaningful targets on that team. Sometimes that can be a bad thing because, defenses are going to key in too much on Brian Thomas, but I think Liam Cohen is going to be smart enough to be able to open things up for him. I'm going with BTJ as the biggest beneficiary because it just removed any doubt, if there was any, that this guy is worth a first-round fantasy pick next year.
Yeah. See, I thought you were not... there was one player who jumped to my mind first for this, and I thought you were going to pick him. Hence my...
I think I know who it is.
This guy is very near and dear to my heart. It's Davante Adams. I think that him going from 2 absolute dumpster fires of organizations with the Raiders, him wanting out, him not being on the same page with everybody, and then going to the Jets with just all the shit that's happening. And for him to still have he had 1,000 yards, didn't he? He still produced, and he missed a couple games as well. You go from that, some of the most unstable places in the league, to arguably the most stable place, where you've got Sean McVay, you've got Matthew Stafford, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, is still playing at a high level in spite of his elderly status. He is still playing good football, and more, like I said, but more importantly, this is a Sean McVay offense, and you could say all you want, Puka's going to be there in this. This offense has made it more than clear that they are capable of producing 2 elite fantasy targets, not just good, not just starters, elite type fantasy. I still love Puka, and I love Davante Adams now. I think just because of where he's been, being in Las Vegas and stuff, kind of falling out of the main, he's not peak Davante Adams, but he's still really fucking good.
Yeah.
And this could not be a better place for him. People talk about Kansas City or Baltimore, all these teams that perennially need a number 1 wide receiver. I don't care if he's technically the number 2 or the 1A or the 1B here. In Los Angeles, 2 wide receivers can very well be the wide receiver 1, and I am all fucking aboard the Devontae Adams train here. And
Yeah, it's always interesting with a wide receiver. We joke about old people all the time on this show, but wide receivers over the age of 30 and their production. So I'm looking at currently the most receiving yards in a season by a wide receiver older than age 30. And there's a lot of guys that went, well over 1,000 yards. And Devontae is what, 32, I think, right now? Let me double check.
Sounds
32.
right.
32, he'll turn 33 in December. So, we're
Happy
looking
birthday.
at, Jerry Rice is an alien. He had 1,800 yards at age 33. Guys like Andre Johnson, Brandon Marshall, let's see, who else is recent memory? Reggie Wayne, Terrell Owens, Wes Welker. All these guys had really good years, into their early 30s. And Devontae's also a guy who doesn't really have the mileage on him from early in his career like some of these other guys do. Devontae, if you guys remember, was a kind of a slow burn receiver. He didn't break out until year 3, where he was 3 yards short of 1,000. He had 997 and 12 touchdowns. But his first 2 years with the Packers, he only had 88 total catches for under 1,000 yards for 4 touchdowns. So that makes me think too, he's not like a real 32.
It's crazy because I used to talk to a person at that time who was a Packers fan, and I used to clown he or she all the time about how Devontae Adams just had brick hands. That man could not catch a fucking football.
Crazy.
Year 1 and 2. And then that third year, he just went... Like, not only did he just get better, like, he fucking shot out of a cannon.
Yep.
Which is interesting because that's what I used to call that person too. So that's a weird that's a weird connection there.
No. Cannon.
You guys are learning so much more about the Pat lore in this moment right now. But it's true. And also, has he had like a major injury, like a major leg injury? I'm not remembering one.
Let me see. Devontae Adams injury history. We'll get our researchers on it. Get on it, Cletus. We don't have a Cletus. Let's see here. Hamstring, knee strain, concussion, MCL sprain. No, it doesn't look like he's ever done anything catastrophic.
Had like surgery. That's what I mean. So like obviously he's got these kind of ticky-tacky leg injuries, which arguably could be, harder to play through.
Sure.
Because you don't play through breaks and shit. But like, it could affect your, but like you said, no mileage, not a big injury history. I think he's got a lot left in the tank. And all those guys that you listed that are, they're either in the Hall of Fame or going to be in the Hall of Fame. So is Devontae Adams.
Right. That's what I was getting at too.
He's on par with a lot of those guys not named Jerry Rice and that you listed. So there's no reason to think he can't keep producing, let alone in arguably one of the best spots to produce.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at is there's guys, when you're projecting or hoping that a guy is going to produce past age 30 or well past age 30, you kind of need them to be sort of one of one, cut from a different cloth type of guy, and that's exactly what Devontae Adams is. And I agree with you. You can't really step into a more ideal situation than, one of the best and also gunslingerist quarterbacks like Matt Stafford, coached by a whiz like Sean McVay, with only one other guy as target competition. Like, that's pretty much an ideal spot. So I'm with you as far as Devontae being a beneficiary here of this offseason. All right, with my second pick, Pat, I have a feeling that second-year players are going to be a theme for me in this draft.
Wow.
I already liked the rookies last year, but I'm going to go with a guy near and dear to your heart. I'm going with Brock Bowers.
Damn it!
Brock Bowers is sitting there now. Another guy like Malik Neighbors put up really good numbers with really garbage quarterbacks last season, and now he gets a guy that's not only stable, but I think Geno Smith is one of the best, like, pure throwers of the football in the game. I got him top 12 at the very least. He's going to have Geno Smith as his quarterback. And, Pat, I was scrubbing through the Raiders' depth chart. Pat, what the fuck are your receivers? Because who is Ramel Keaton, and why is he projected to start?
No.
Go search Raiders or search NFL wide receiver depth chart, or just Raiders wide receiver depth chart, and look at Ramel Keaton.
The fine folks at ESPN do not have him starting, but they do have a man named Kyle Phillips with one L, by the way.
I know who
starting.
Kyle Phillips is, but same thing. I was looking at, let me see, NFL wide receiver depth charts. I always use this because it's like a bulk thing. It's from our lads.
Who are you people?
It's from ourlads.com, and they have it for every team. And yeah, when you go to the Raiders, it's Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and Ramel Keaton. And I was like, it just, not that that changed anything, but it was just hilarious to put a true name and visual to the fact that in Las Vegas, it's Brock Bowers. And then Jacoby Myers is solid, but like it's Brock Bowers. And he's now got a better quarterback. I think he has benefited as much as anybody from just, they didn't add anybody major in the receiving department yet, and they added a better quarterback, and he was already really fucking good last year.
Yeah.
So give me Brock Bowers.
Yep, hence why he was also near my list. I don't think I would have picked him next, but yeah, he was somebody also here. I'm going to steal your thunder here and take a second-year player.
You bitch.
I'm taking Caleb Williams.
You dirty bitch.
Right. Again, him and Adams were the first two names, outside of Neighbors, rest in peace, that I thought of doing this. And the Bears did pretty much everything in their power, or are going to do everything in their power, to make this situation better, to bring in Ben Johnson, who, as far as we know, is an offensive guru. And if he can bring that to Chicago, they go and they trade for Jonah Jackson, they trade for Joe Thuney. Those are... their line was Swiss cheese. Hello, Packers fans, but their line was their biggest weakness on not a good football team, outside of Matt Eberflus. He was their biggest weakness. So you bolster the offensive line. You don't necessarily make a lot of moves in terms of targets, but you're effectively getting a new player in Roma Dunze here, who, Keenan Allen's gone. He is going to step in. As we've seen the talent from DJ Moore. He had a nice stretch there at the beginning and end of the year, as well as the hilarious middle. There are good pieces around them, and they seem destined to draft one of the many talented running backs here in this draft. So combine the line, Ben Johnson, having a good cast around him, and I mean, look what Jared Goff did under Ben Johnson. And, I'm not going to say that Caleb Williams is a better quarterback than Jared Goff, but I think
he's more fantasy friendly.
I think the ceiling is higher, and I think
Yeah.
one day in time we'll be saying that Caleb Williams is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. So, does he shoot up to be like one of these set it and forget it quarterbacks? I don't quite think so, but I think he'll kind of be more on the better side of the streamer thing, where he's kind of like, again, I always talk out of my ass when I do this, but, he kind of comes off as like a QB 10 kind of guy for me, potentially. But that's a guy that you're happy to start here.
I think that's probably where he's going to get drafted, is like that QB 10 to 12 range. But like, I do think there's absolutely what you're looking at, what you got.
Fantasy Pros has him as QB 14.
Okay. I mean, we could expect that.
That's fair, because you look at guys ahead of him. Kyler, Herbert, Love, Nix, Purdy, all fair. All fair to be at the very least in that range or ahead of him.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. With him being drafted in that range, even if he does jump a few spots once the non-psychopaths start to, mock draft and do that kind of thing, I do think there's a chance he ends up as a set and forget player. I think you put all that around him, like, there's no reason he can't reach that unless he's just not destined to really be a great NFL quarterback. So it's kind of, not to say it's do or die. It's not like the Bears are going to move on from him if he doesn't have a good year, but this is a year where it's like, look, we're putting all this around you. And yeah, it may take a couple weeks or even months to like really have everything gel, because there is so much turnover with the quarterback and the offensive line and the offensive coordinator. But like, I think if Caleb Williams is the guy we think he is, or the guy that he was drafted to be, there should come a time, even if it's not right off the bat, but by like week 7 or 8, where he is a set and forget fantasy quarterback, because otherwise he's not built to be what he was drafted to be. I think that's just where he's at. With my third pick in this, I am going to go, got a couple options here. All right, I'm going to go with my boy. This is not a second-year player. This is Devon Achane. Because the Dolphins have only added one running back in free agency, and it is Alexander Mattison. And pardon me if I am unmoved by the existence of Alexander Mattison.
That's like the second former Raider you've slandered. You only get one more of those.
Alexander Mattison was a Raider for 10 seconds. I don't fucking care. Although he was also your best running back at one point last season. Nonetheless, Devon Achane, we've talked about his outlook being largely dependent on what else they do in that running back room, because he's just not. He's not necessarily the best actual between the tackles runner, not the most efficient guy because he is small, but he is damn elusive, and he is going to be a damn large part of the Dolphins' game plan no matter what. It's just a matter of what else they add around him. As it stands right now with a backfield of him, year 2 Jalen Wright, and now free agent signing Alexander Mattison, it would not surprise me if the Dolphins don't draft a running back because it almost makes you. I mean, sure they could carry 4, and would bumping Madison down to RB4 really be a shock? No, but they have a guy now that it makes me think they don't have to do that if there's not a guy they're in love with.
And it sort of defeats the purpose of Jalen Wright, because isn't that kind of what they did last year? Go and draft, a mid-late round running back to put into the fold. You don't really need a third one of those guys there. That is a good pick. And like we said, even with Jonnu Smith's genuine emergence, the Dolphins still kind of run their offense through a narrow playing field, usually of Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and the running back, which seems to now not almost exclusively, but predominantly be Devon Achane.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to actually go with a running back as well. This is a good friend of mine, Najee Harris. Okay. I'm going Najee Harris here just because, again, is he the most elite talented running back in the league? No. Like, he's got the 1,000 yards every year, which isn't an awfully impressive stat, but I think the impressive thing about it is his durability. He is always on the field. He's always on the injury report, but he's always on the field. And you are going from a situation where you are in a Arthur Smith offense, which granted likes to run the ball, but it's Arthur Smith. It is Arthur Smith. There is always nonsense. There is Jalen Warren. There's Cordero Patterson. There's Justin Fields. There was a lot of nonsense around him. You bring him to a Chargers team that is building their offensive line, that had a great year with J.K. Dobbins, who is the opposite of Najee Harris in terms of durability.
Yep.
And he had a great year when he was on the field. And J.K. Dobbins is gone. And you go and you bring in Najee Harris and don't bring in anyone else. You have you get rid of Gus Edwards, Kamani Vidal, whoever is Isaiah Spiller still there.
Kamani Vidal is Barry Sanders, but
friend
go on.
Friend of the show, Austin Eckler, maybe is there. I don't know. I don't know what's shit. So for him to now go in a position where even if he may not be the most talented running back, I don't want to quite compare him to Kyron Williams because that situation is really, really good. But I'll compare him in the sense that the running back, the talent may not be the best, but the enough talent with a good situation is going to put him in a very, very good spot here.
I'm with you. It's going to be, I think, a tough sell when I'm finally on the clock in fantasy to want to draft Najee Harris because of all the things you mentioned of he's just not that great, but I've also been the guy that hesitated and hasn't drafted Kyron Williams. And let me tell you, last year I would have loved to have a Kyron Williams. So sometimes you got to bite the bullet just because of situation, and sometimes situation and availability are way more important than how elite of a talent you are and what your fucking 40 time is. All right, with my next pick, I am gonna go with a guy that I just keep tweeting about, and God, I want him, Pat. It's Ricky Pearsall.
Good boy.
The Niners have
you just
traded.
Want to take a shot at him?
I sure do, right to the chest. The Niners have traded Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders, opening some things up for Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, you could argue it opens things up for Jawan Jennings as well, which it certainly does. Brandon Ayuk, there are some trade rumors there. God, if he was gone, then it's truly Ricky to the moon. But this is mostly an investment of draft capital, betting on what he did at the end of last year and the vacated targets by Deebo Samuel. And then also a bit of, what are we going to get from Brandon Ayuk? We don't know. So all of those things come together for me to just really believe that Ricky Pearsall is due to have a pretty sizable role for the Niners next year. And we know what wide receivers with sizable roles have done in the past. So I like Ricky Pearsall. I think that first round draft capital is something we really shouldn't forget. That's how much they liked him, that the 49ers, despite at the time, yes, there were the rumors about Brandon Ayuk and all that, but they had a good receiver room and they said, we're spending our first round pick on a wide receiver, and it's Ricky Pearsall. So I think this is the year. I think the opportunity's there. I just think it all lines up, and I'm going with Ricky P.
I like that pick. Actually, Jawan Jennings was on my list, not Ricky Pearsall, but I'll effectively take him
Draft
off now.
him, bitch.
I think I might cheat here a little bit.
Oh, you dirty cheater.
I'm going to take Ashton Genty. And here's my rationale.
Okay. Go on.
The fact that there are, I would say, about 4 teams here that have absolutely laid the red carpet for him. You look at the Raiders, the Cowboys, the Broncos. I would even put the Bears in that conversation with DeAndre Swift there. I think there are ample places for him to go where he will just absolutely dominate the touches. Like, these teams did nothing at the position. The Raiders got fucking Raheem Mostert. Whoop-de-fucking do. Like,
Must start, baby.
The Broncos, what, you got rid of... Is Jaleel McLaughlin gone too?
No, he's there. They only got rid of Javonte. So they got Jaleel and Estime.
Yeah, exactly. 2 guys who did not show a whole lot last year.
Yep.
And you bring in nobody. Dallas, you lose Rico Dowdle, and you bring in Javonte. Again,
I mean, Dallas has some studs. They got Miles Sanders, too.
Incredibly inconsequential moves. If Genty goes to one of those teams, he is a surefire first-round pick. Even the Raiders, which my mind and heart is set on the fact that he is going to be a Raider. And even we don't know what that offense is going to look like. I don't care because he is a monster and he is going to get fucking force-fed the foot. Whenever the ball's not in Brock Bowers' hands, it's going to be in Ashton Genty's chest. So I think that, the expectations here potentially were very high for him. I think they've somehow been exceeded here because if he goes into a murky situation, just kill us all. Just kill us all. But I think there have been many teams, especially like Dallas or Denver, who have potential to be genuinely good offenses. Holy fuck, man.
No, I agree with you. I think those are all valid points, and they make him a valid pick because we could have been sitting here where there weren't any obvious spots. Like, yes, teams are going to have, lackluster running back rooms and what have you, but you look at what these teams have done, and it does almost seem like there are multiple teams literally opening up a spot for Ashton Genty to just step through. I think particularly of the Bears, just with what they've done with the line, not signing anybody other than just having DeAndre Swift, bringing Ben Johnson in. And again, these moves were not made like, okay, how can we best accommodate Ashton Genty? But it's moves that have done the same effect as how can we make our offense better. So the Bears, the Raiders with Pete Carroll, he loves to run the ball. I think you make all very good points.
And I just thought of the Steelers, too. But could you imagine if, the next prodigy running back just has to deal with Arthur Smith?
Oh, fucking shoot me. No.
But again, they're in a position. But, yeah, I think that the path is clearer than ever for him to be a stud.
Oh, Pat, you just broke my.
The Cowboys got Javonte. Who cares, Alex? I know.
Who cares?
I'm here to tell you, we don't care.
You've just made me so sad at the prospect of him going to the Steelers because that is objectively a problem if it happens. This is a guy. This is a guy with the same exact sort of pedigree that Bijan came out with.
Summoning circle.
Bijan came from a better school, and then Arthur Smith. I mean, granted, the only saving grace, I guess, is that the Steelers don't have another running back that Arthur Smith drafted like they did with Tyler Algier and his weird allegiance to it. But Cordero Patterson was getting fucking touches. He might just still be in Pittsburgh. Yeah, no, please God, anywhere else.
Summoning circle.
Even a murky draft room, even a murky fucking running back room, I'd be more okay with. All right, with my last pick here, Pat, I'm gonna go with maybe an off the beaten path one, but I'm gonna go with Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk got traded to the Texans. Tank Dell's not going to play this year. Stefon Diggs, as we know, is now a Patriot. Christian Kirk is the clear wide receiver 2 on this team with no discernible tight end as of right now. I mean, Dalton Schultz is fine. He wasn't anything that was super startable in fantasy over the course of a full season. I think people have overlooked a little bit how much the Texans are paying Christian Kirk. They basically traded for him and agreed to take on the entire salary. So he's making $16.5 million in 2025 with an extra $3 million available in incentives. This is a guy that that sort of financial commitment tells me they are expecting to get contributions from. And his spot on the depth chart suggests that they are going to get contributions from him. So I think Christian Kirk, even with the injury history, coming off the injury this past year, is going to be a big part of this offense, and he's a guy I could very easily see myself taking with a late sort of fantasy pick because he's a guy that I don't think is going to get a lot of hype because of name value. He's a guy you can kind of just sneak and draft, in the later rounds, and you might be looking at a guy that's going to get 100 targets this year. So whether C.J. Stroud has more than 0.3 seconds to throw the ball is a different story, but in the rare occasions where he does have some time to throw the ball, Christian Kirk's probably going to be catching it quite a bit because Nico Collins, as much as he may try, cannot do literally everything. So I'm going with Christian Kirk.
No, that was not something on my. I actually thought of Nico Collins potentially more so.
Sure, I mean, fair.
than
Yeah.
than Christian Kirk there. I'm kind of going here more so like things are looking good now, and I'm basically trying to manifest that this situation stays the same. It's Chase Brown.
Had him
I
on my
think
board.
I think the fact that the biggest move they made was Samaje Perine, who obviously is going to be on the field and is going to play his role, but he is going to be on the field definitively less than Zach Moss was, or would have been had Zach Moss stayed healthy throughout the year. Like, he's going to be more than Khalil Herbert was, that's for sure. Like, yeah, he'll take away some pass catching, but Chase Brown was really good in the passing game this past year as well, and showed that he could handle the workload. He was getting huge workloads, and man, was he producing. And there is no reason to believe that this Bengals offense isn't going to be insane again and be in a position. The worry is just, do they draft a running back? And the thing is, my bet is yes, but where? If you draft someone in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, it's like, okay, you brought in someone for depth purposes. If they draft someone on, late day 2, early day 3, I'm going to be sweating, as a Chase Brown dynasty owner. But it's more the fact that if things stay the same right now, get to the moon. To the fucking moon.
Yep, I'm with you.
Pat's
He was on
pal
my
territory.
board. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like the Bengals offense, Pat, we mentioned it last week with the Jamar and T contracts. Like, it is the easiest offense to invest in from a fantasy perspective of just, they are admitting themselves essentially that they're going to have to lean on the offense. Like, they need that offense to score 30 plus points a game, if not 40 in some games, if not 50 in some games, if not 60. I think getting any piece of that offense, knowing that that's what their identity is going to be, is absolutely a good strategy. And if Chase Brown turns out he is manning the backfield mostly by himself, absolutely. I think I'll be very curious to see where his ADP ends up, because if they say they don't draft a running back, or say they do draft a 7th round running back, like, are we talking 2nd round for Chase Brown? I don't think he'll go first because of how pass first the Bengals are, but like, are we talking 2nd round for Chase Brown? I feel like that is probably fair. I believe you've muted yourself, Chase Brown apologist.
God damn it. I don't even remember what I was doing. Oh, but yeah.
Agreeing with me because I'm so smart.
Yes. I would say 2nd round. I think he would kind of definitively be in that 2nd tier of running backs, where it's like, it's not going to be this elite guy that absolutely carries your team. But if he's your RB1 in this draft, after you take a good receiver in the 1st round, you're really happy.
Absolutely. All right, that finishes our draft of the biggest fantasy football beneficiaries of this offseason. I've got Brian Thomas Jr. It was Brian Thomas Jr., Brock Bowers, Devon Achane, Ricky Pearsall, and Christian Kirk. Pat's got Devontae Adams, Caleb Williams, Najee Harris, Ashton Genty, and Chase Brown. All right, before we go off the air with today's show, it's time for some March Madness reactions, Pat. And it's pretty much all bad. As much as all around, it's pretty much all bad. So first things first, we did a draft last week. We would be doing a disservice if we did not update the folks. Pat and I went back and forth drafting teams that we thought would possibly be upset picks for this tournament, and we were going to get points based on how many total upsets those teams ended up getting. I ended up getting 1 correct with Drake beating Mizzou, and Pat ended up getting 1 correct with Colorado State beating Memphis. Both of those teams lost in the 2nd round, and it just is kind of a larger theme of this tournament's kind of fucking mid, Pat. It's kind of mid.
From the entertainment standpoint, yeah. But at the end, like, I think there is merit to the better teams advancing, though. Because at the end of the day, like, you want your champion to be one of the best teams. And we're seeing a lot of good basketball played, but it's just the games themselves have not been, nearly as exciting, especially the 1st round. Like, that Clemson game got fun at the end, but, it's just, and that's one of the only upsets, McNeese beating Clemson. Thanks a lot, Clemson. But, just the madness aspect just was not there. But at the same time, it's like, I think you could still kind of sit there and say, like, yeah, but, we're seeing a lot of good basketball, and we're seeing the really good teams, and we could potentially be seeing some really, really good matchups that could swing the public perception of this tournament if we get some really great games here at the end.
It's possible. I think my issue is that normally in tournaments we do get the best of both, right? Like normally the best
Yeah,
teams
sure.
the best teams do win the tournament, and the best teams are playing each other later down the stretch. Yes, when a Cinderella wins 2 games, you do have, the potential for, say, a fucking High Point advanced in this, out of the first weekend, and then they get blown out in the future rounds because their luck just ran out. Like, that can happen. But, like, I am perfectly willing to sacrifice the quality of, like, 1 or 2 second weekend games if it means getting those moments and getting that chaos out of the first round. So I think this tournament is kind of sorely lacking that, which is unfortunate. And I think, you had more of a measured opinion on the topic, Pat, but I've seen some almost intentional ignorance from some of the ball appreciators, if you will, over the course of the weekend, where they act like, Princeton beating Arizona, that kind of result isn't what March is all about. They act like Jack Golke chucking up threes and knocking off Kentucky isn't what March is all about. All I saw for a week leading up to March Madness were memes about how some future accountant is going to drop 30 on your favorite team's head, and that's what makes March so much fun. And then come this weekend, you get people saying when that doesn't happen, they're like, no, that's not what March is about. It's just about the best basketball. You don't appreciate good basketball. No, the point is that we normally get both, and it's okay to admit that this tourney is a little bit lackluster and lacks a little bit of personality. I'm excited for the quality of basketball going forward, but this hasn't felt like March Madness. It hasn't. And I think if every tournament was like this, that would not be a good thing for the sport.
I can agree with that. And the thing is, though, we've seen a lot of good basketball, but it's a lot of these cases it's just been one team playing really good basketball with another team, not as much. It's cool to see Arkansas, take down St. John's. Florida, we'll talk about them in just a minute, but for them to almost go down, like there have been the Maryland buzzer beater as well. Like there have been some good moments, but like you think about as of right now, like are there any like one shining moments here outside of the Maryland? I would say the buzzer beater for Maryland would probably go on that, but besides that, maybe the fucking derpy ass McNeese State manager might get a segment there at this point.
Manager. That's where we're at with this tournament, Pat. That the student manager is one of the biggest like personality pieces of the tournament. I think I made a video about just the irony of this with the tournament, that like the madness that we had in the first round was a buzzer beater where a 4 seed beat a 12. That was the madness. The buzzer beater was for a favorite to knock off a double-digit seed. And then the only double-digit seed to advance to the Sweet 16 is coached by John Calipari. That's not madness. This tournament is trying to put forth a weird excuse for a little semblance of madness when it's just not there. So, look, I'm not saying the tournament's a dud, and I also want to make this very clear. I'm not saying that we need to be drawing any sweeping conclusions about it either, because while I am disappointed by how the tournament played out in the first weekend, I am not jumping to blame anything. I'm just sad that it happened. I've seen people blaming NIL. I'm not going that far. I understand the connection you can make there where, anytime a mid-major gets a really good player that could potentially lead them to an upset, well, they're just going to leave before they actually lead them there and, go and join a power team. Like we had 3 different FAU players from a couple years ago who were all on Sweet 16 teams, one with Michigan, one with Arkansas, and one with somebody else. No, Florida. Florida was the other one. It was the guy that kind of torched us. So I get it from that perspective, but like also we can't sit here and act like this has never happened before. I think sometimes we're just due for a less chaotic tournament. The last time this happened was 2007, where it was even chalkier. This tournament at least has a couple of seeds that are, we have a 10 seed in there. In 2011 or 2007, there were no teams lower than a 7 seed in the Sweet 16. Like it was like 1, 3, 5, and 6, and 1, all that. So we've had this happen before. I didn't do it. We've had this happen before, and I just don't think we need to like fully blame NIL yet, because the chaos is going to happen mostly thanks to unheralded players like Jack Golke. Like that, those guys are still going to pop up. So I'm not blaming NIL yet. If we have a couple more tournaments in a row like this, maybe we can talk. And NIL absolutely needs some regulations, but I don't think we need to, like, I saw Stephen A. is like going crazy about this tournament. He's like, it'll kill the sport if this keeps happening. And I'm like, There's no reason to think this is more than a one-off, at least for now. It happens. It just does.
I forgot which coach it was, but one of the players said, like, oh, well, he pays us the money. Oh, it was Kevin Willard with Maryland after that, and you just see him just sitting there like this after the play. Like, yeah, it's become a different animal. But on the other side of the coin, you could say that there are a lot of these really good players from, major conference teams that don't play and kind of have to drop down a little bit to these mid-majors. Right. But I mean, I think we could go deep into this in terms of big conference bias in general being the bigger problem, but we don't need to do that. We need to cry about UConn.
Absolutely. So, yeah, not blaming NIL just yet, although it definitely does need some regulation because what's happening right now is crazy. The fact that the transfer portal opened already before, like
700 people
with 700 to 1,000 players entering while we still have 32 teams still playing in the NCAA tournament is fucking insane. Is it 32 or is it 16? No, sorry, we're in the Sweet 16. Duh. Still insane that it's happening before the season's over. But yes, UConn. This is a UConn-centric podcast, UConn-sponsored, UConn-supporting, not sponsored, supporting podcast. Sponsors. And our team, Pat, is out of the mix, obviously, lost to Florida. Got knocked off Oklahoma, though. So, I mean, look, won a game. That was, honestly, after we beat Oklahoma, I was like, if it ends after this, like, so be it. I've watched this team all year enough to know that a deep run would require, granted, something UConn fans have seen in the past, which is some real magic and some real pulling something out of our ass. And honestly, it ended up being even closer than I thought. What a fucking fight out of this team against Florida, man. It makes me proud. I could shed a tear.
I unfortunately could not watch or even check the score the entire time. Like, I was completely cut off from the world. So I get home and I check Twitter and
darkness retreat.
And see like they lost, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, they. And then I checked the score and saw it was 2, and I was like, no! I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, I figured, like, lose by 8 or 10. It's like, yeah, okay, not bad.
What we expected.
Like, the fact that they could have won that game is, it hurts. It hurts more. It hurts more. But this is kind of the way I've viewed it all year. Is like, we have gotten so spoiled to win 2 straight to watch our team win 2 straight national championships. That's like, this is what teams do every year. They be an 8 seed, middle of the road team, win a game and lose. Like, there are teams that will never sniff a Final Four, let alone win a national championship. So it's like, I see so many people shitting on Dan Hurley. It's like, oh, he lost in the second round. He should have gone to the Lakers. The man just won 2 national championships with a school that, when he got there, was in the toilet.
Yeah.
That was missing.
Toilet might be generous because we're talking about the American Athletic Conference.
Yeah, I was going to say that was
the dirtiest porta potty you've ever seen in your fucking life.
And like, so, yeah, like this team just wasn't as good. They did not have. Everyone always said like, oh, he's a Donovan Clingan merchant. He's a Tristan Newton merchant. If anything,
if anything,
that is the biggest thing that this team lacked this year was a Tristan Newton, a floor general who not only wanted the ball in his hands to make something happen, or he could go and score it himself. Like, he could shoot. He could. They really lacked that kind of player this year. And at the end of the day, I think that was their undoing. They were a lot older last year. Cam Spencer as well, and they just were not as good, but they still had a good year. They still made the tournament. They won some big games. They lost some hilarious games in Maui. It's like, this is what college basketball is. Like, yeah, of course, it's crazy to watch your team lose for the first time in the NCAA tournament in 3 years.
Yeah,
but
crazy.
And, the only thing I think about now is just like, especially now with the transfer portal, who the hell knows what happens next here? Like, Hurley was on 60 Minutes about a month or so ago, and he said that he would not be surprised if half the team transfers, and that some of them already know where they're going. See, that is the problem with NIL. That should not be happening. That's like straight up tampering. Again, we don't know exactly how that's going, how that's working or not, but, I put this in our show sheet. To me, it seems like there are only 2 players that will definitively be on this team next year, and it's Solo Ball and Terrace Reed Jr. Yep. Those are the only 2 guys that I would be agree. Flabbergasted if they left, because they will be focal points of this team next year. And Ball's at a point where I think he could be a first-round pick if he has a good junior year. The kid is great and can shoot who knew he could? I didn't know he could shoot like that until this year. But then you look at, they've got a great, and not just like a good, they had a good class coming in this year. They have a great
It's
elite
insane
class here.
I hope people realize what's coming.
You've got a point guard in Darius Adams. You've got a 7-footer in Eric Reed. You've got, oh God, what's the other kid's name? Mullins? Braylon Mullins? Braylon Mullins, who's kind of, he's a top 10 prospect. And then you kind of, you're losing Samson Johnson and Asandiara, guys that 2 national championships, sat on the bench for a while, stuck with the program, and reaped the benefits. Like, major props to those 2 guys. We'll love those 2 guys forever. Alex Caravan just straight up needs to go, unfortunately. And it's crazy to say that, like, in college, like, it's the pros, like, oh, they gotta let Caravan go. But I think that's what's gonna happen. Just straight up the fact where they're just gonna be like, hey, there's no spot for you on this team. And
I don't know if I'd go that far if he wants to come back. I get what you're saying. You bring in 3 McDonald's All-Americans on top of having Terrace Reed and Solo Ball. But to me, it's like, I don't know that, Eric Reeby, I think might be the pronunciation, is the center, is the big guy that we're bringing in. Like, we're not going to play him and Terrace Reed together. So I think there's a world where you've got a starting lineup of, I would prefer maybe a better ball handler than this. I don't really know what Darius Adams brings to the table in that realm. But like, let's say your starting lineup is Solo Ball, the two of the 3 freshmen with Reeby on the bench. You got Solo Ball, Darius Adams, Braylon Mullins, Alex Caravan, Terrace Reed. Like, I think there is a world where there's a spot, and I would be very happy to have him back just because, as much as I'm excited to have literally the best recruiting class UConn has ever had from a pedigree perspective coming in, it does frighten me to lean on 3 freshmen next year if we can help it. So I don't think they'll push Caravan out. I think it'll be a matter of maybe if he is really torn, they're like, hey man, you've done a lot for us. Go ahead, go make some real money. I don't know what that looks like though, between what he's making at UConn with NIL and what he's going to make
now.
And what he's going to make as a mid to late second rounder, because he came back, I would think, other than the surface level, I want to go for the three-peat thing, like with the idea of improving his draft stock as more of a focal point with no Tristan Newton, no Donovan Clingan, no Cam Spencer. And that didn't happen. So now it's like, do you just accept that, like, I'm the kind of player that's, if and when I enter the draft, it's going to be as a late second rounder, so I might as well just put that off and keep making NIL money and, help these young kids acclimate? Or does he say, I've more, for lack of a better word, like, I've had enough. Like, I'm ready to go pro. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to take a step forward. Yeah. I don't know, but I'd be happy to have him back either way.
And I think people are also saying, like, oh, should McNeely come back? No. Absolutely.
No.
People are even asking that, like, oh, Clingan could sure benefit from another year. It's like, sure, like, yes, that is a correct take that Liam McNeely can benefit from another year. The NBA is so much about projection and potential rather than what you did in college. Like, Liam McNeely is 6'8". He can shoot. He can handle the ball. He can get to the rim. Like, he is just a really good all-around player. And there is no way he does not go in the top half of the first round of the draft. And that is the case. You need to go. They bring in a top 10 recruit knowing that he is a one and done kind of player. And, I'm sure they planned this out. And you got to think about it too. They're going to bring in transfers. This past year they only really brought in Reed and then Aiden Mahaney, who I do believe his name will be in the transfer portal again shortly. Expectations were too.
I thought you were going to say something other than transfer portal. I thought you were going to say in the fucking Hall of Shame at UConn or something.
I feel bad for the kid.
Year.
I feel bad for the kid just in the sense that, like, people thought he was going to be Cam Spencer. And I think people are just kind of overlooking how fucking good Cam Spencer is and was. And
it was just crazy, it was.
And I think people expected him to jump in and fill that role, and he just wasn't that guy, and he caught a lot of heat for it. And I think, did he have a bad year? Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's just, I think a lot of it was based on perception rather than actually what he did and the kind of player he was. I really feel for the kid, and I hope he goes and plays somewhere and has a good last year.
I disagree slightly, only in the sense that there is an ocean in between Cam Spencer and what Mahaney gave us this year.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
Mahaney was legitimately unplayable in the Big East, which was a surprise because he was coming from, not a super low level conference. He was coming from the West Coast Conference with St. Mary's, which is, as we know, outside of them and Gonzaga doesn't really have too much to offer. But like
the San Francisco erasure.
But like we got Cam Spencer from Rutgers, and obviously Rutgers is in a better conference. But like Rutgers is a similar, honestly, they're a lower tier of program than St. Mary's is, and he was incredible. So I think all we wanted out of Mahaney was like not to sigh when we saw him checking in, which is what I felt most of the year. Just be playable, man. Let us get arthritis-ridden Hassan Diarra off the court a little bit more, and it wasn't possible. He just wasn't built for this level.
And he didn't even live up to Joey Calcaterra from 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Like, at least Calcaterra, he might not have been the best player on the court, but he could shoot, and he was an absolute spark plug. Mahaney just... And I think that was the thing with this year. Like, another kid like Jaden Ross, who, like... I like the kid. I just don't know what he does. Like, it seems like he's kind of just, like, getting cardio.
He's just long. He's
there.
Defense. He doesn't do anything offensively.
That's the thing.
Long.
And, like, I heard in the preseason that he was going to be, like, this huge, breakout player. And he just wasn't. And I expect him to be somewhere else next season. But I think, drop down a little to one of those higher mid-majors, and he'll play. He will play, and he will be really good because the kid's a really good player. I think Amando Well is gone, just in the sense that he's now getting passed up on the depth chart. He can go somewhere and play. Because, again, he had some good... He can pass the ball at the very least. And then there's Jalen Stewart.
Please stay, Jalen.
Dan Hurley has done a lot of things right, almost in terms of player personnel. I think he's missed the mark here on Jalen Stewart in the sense that he needed to play him more, and I think he's going to lose him because of it. Like, we've seen guys like Corey Floyd and like Rasul Diggins go to other places and just be okay, solid. Like, were they good enough to play on these championship UConn teams? No, not really. I think this is a kid that could very well be their starting. Like you said, you could see the lineup with Caravan. You could see the lineup with Jalen Stewart there
definitely.
As the 4. The kid can play, and again, the energy he brings, with his finishing ability, with his shooting ability, everything. And then, like, I believe that's his dad on Twitter. I can never tell if it is his dad.
Yeah.
Tweeted like, regardless of what happens, this has been 2 great years, yada 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 yada. And that's very cryptic. And this is a kid from Seattle. He's not from the area, bound to the area. He can go somewhere to like a high major school and play.
He goes to Gonzaga and lights it up. I will kill myself.
And like be
Straight
valued as the player and be valued as the player he should be. I think that if he does leave, I think that will be the big one that got away from Dan Hurley. And I think at the end of the day, it was completely preventable because he just didn't play enough. His dad tweeted like that he was plus 16 in one game a few games ago, but only played like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think he deleted that because, I think he realized like, oh shit. Like
it was questionable for sure because especially late in the year, like Jalen Stewart was the only player coming off the bench other than Terrace Reed. I mean, him and Samson Johnson were basically just co-starters at center, but Jalen Stewart was the only one that came off the bench that I was actually happy to see come in. Yeah. There would be, when Mahaney would come in, when Jaden Ross would come in, it was, oh fuck, I'm clenching my butthole a little bit because they both tend to do things that make me scratch my head. Jalen Stewart definitely wasn't like spotlight wasn't on him. He wasn't doing crazy stuff all the time, but every time he did something, it seemed to help us. And I think he should have gotten Jaden Ross's minutes a lot sooner because, like you said, I really don't see what he did well other than be long and be a menace on defense because of his size. But yeah, Jalen Stewart should have been more of a piece of this UConn team.
And that was the problem too. There were so many times where there were no scorers on the floor outside of the center. And again, like if you have to play exclusively through one guy, it's just, unless the guy is Zach Edey, it's just not going to work out like that. With Caravan disappointing and Mahaney disappointing, and Diarra not necessarily being a pure scorer. Like, remember that like buzzer beater he attempted where it was just like, bro, what the hell were you doing with the basketball in your hand? It's just like there were so many times you look out there and like there is no offense on the court right now. And again, it's just the team was just not as good as they have been. But at the end of the year, I fucking love UConn basketball. Like what this 10
We're
minutes
so lucky.
This 10 minutes of yapping like this, like this shit like fuels me. I'll know more about this team that we'll forget about in 5 years than I ever will about fantasy football.
I think that's fair. No, we are incredibly lucky to have been born in this stupid tiny ass state that has no professional teams other than the Connecticut Sun, and it just happens to have the most accomplished, objectively, college basketball program of the last 3 decades. Yeah. Like it's insane. So no, very happy. I'm very optimistic for UConn going forward with the recruiting class and everything. I trust the staff to figure everything out. The last beat here that I want to talk about is just some thoughts on Dan Hurley, because there is some obsession with him, and I think it's crazy. Yeah, we talked about this a little throughout the year too, because of the flack that he got, during the Maui Invitational and post Maui Invitational. Look, Dan Hurley's a big personality. I get it. And if you don't like the fact that he yells at refs, and I will admit he probably does it more than your average coach, even though he also gets it covered a lot more than your average coach. He does overdo it. He's a hothead for sure. At the end of the day, Dan Hurley is a very much good-hearted person, and the media blows up this stuff when there are coaches out there, Pat, that have done some fucked up stuff, and that people don't care. There are coaches out there that have done legitimately illegal, gross things, and you don't hear a thing about it because it's more funny to say, ha, bald man, red face, yelling at ref. Like, it's just so easy to pile on the guy. Go ahead if you want. At the end of the day, we have the best coach in the sport, and I will stand on that. And anybody that says, like, Klingon Merchant or Newton Merchant, like,
insane.
If you want to say that as a joke, fine, meme away, feel free. If you want to be realistic, he plucked Tristan Newton out of East Carolina and turned him into an All-American point guard. He's allowed to lean on a player that he developed and created and win a championship with him and be given the benefit of the doubt that he can do it again.
And he built programs at Wagner and Rhode Island as well, and then came and pulled a UConn one out of oblivion, wherever they were with Kevin Ollie.
Yeah, Dan Hurley is him. You don't have to like him. I would highly recommend respecting him because he's not fucking going anywhere. Folks, that will do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
Brand doesn't have a big package. Bye-bye.
You had a litany of things to choose from.
Yeah,
today was.
I panicked at the end. Yeah.
All right, folks. We will answer your donation questions before we get to some general ones. JE Films with $1.99 just said, "I'm a big fan." Hey, man, I'm a big fan of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bucko.
What if he was talking to me?
I mean, probably.
My
ego's gotten too big.
I've got like 10 fans, I think. I got some guys that message me on Instagram.
He also, I'm just going to go through JE's messages first, because he also just donated another 99 cents with no message, and then donated $4.99. It said JETS, Jets.
You think that's what the JE is in his name?
Possibly. I'm sorry that you're a Jets fan, but thank you for supporting and being a fan. Bucko, donating pounds again, said, cheers for the Louisville Cardinals pick, lads. Got to buy a Brady Patriots shirt now. I lost a bet because of it and completely fucked my bracket.
How far do you have them going? Oh, you mentioned them as a Final Four,
so
potentially. I didn't do that.
So this one's on me, and this is also a result of us doing a show on a Tuesday and me having 2 more days to think about and tinker my bracket, because when push came to shove, I did not have Louisville in my Final Four. I had Louisville. I did have them beating Auburn. I will admit that. I had them beating Auburn, but I had them going out the next round to Texas A&M, who also didn't make it through. But yeah, I kind of soured on Louisville a little bit. I apologize for leading you astray. That was not good form by me. But you have to buy a Brady Patriots shirt now, which ultimately that works out in my favor because go Patriots, baby. Bucko with another £5 said, with Russell going to the Giants, that means Rodgers to the Steelers. How does this affect the draft with the Giants no longer needing a quarterback? Yeah, we touched on most of that in the show. I think the Giants, I guess we didn't explicitly say this, I do not expect them to draft a quarterback at 3. I think they will go a different direction now. I don't think you sign 2 quarterbacks, even though the Jameis contract is one we could look at, in a couple months as they could cut him and it really not be a big deal. At the end of the day, like $4 million a year, $8 million total isn't nothing. That's not a guy you sign with the idea of, yeah, we'll have him off of our roster if it doesn't go right. I think they have a plan to keep him around, so I don't expect them to draft a quarterback high, which is crazy.
Especially when you're looking at least one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, who, like we've said multiple times, could have been number 1 picks in other drafts where quarterback wasn't the biggest need. No chance here, and I think.
Lucian said, with $2, said Will Campbell is now the obvious choice at pick 3. I don't agree with that. I think there's a lot of talent. I get it. The Giants could use an O-lineman, but I think the talent, is a little bit higher at these other positions. I don't expect
These
Will
guys
Campbell.
are too good, I think.
I don't think Will Campbell's coming off the board when both Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are available, which is going to be the case at pick 3. Like, those guys aren't going 1-2, considering the Cam Ward rumbling. So I get what you mean with O-line being in need. I just don't think Campbell is enough of a high-level prospect to the level that Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are. So I doubt it. Lucian with another 5 said, if Mason Rudolph gets an above 500 season with Pittsburgh, he could become the next Matt Flynn.
Oh, boy.
No, see, Matt Flynn did that shit off of one game. Mason Rudolph ain't putting together a full campaign that gets him high-level money if we're being realistic. So, yeah, that is still crazy that Matt Flynn did that. Bucko with 5 pounds said, do you think it hurts Rodgers' ego that Brady retired at 45 at a team like the Bucs while good teams don't seem to want him at 41? Probably. I imagine he wants to be wanted, and the fact that he is feeling maybe backed into a corner here with the Steelers because they're the only team that is showing interest, that could be a factor, yeah, and it's probably part of why he might end up waiting until camp for an injury to pop up and for him to find a different destination. I definitely think that's a possibility. Pat, GP Glazer with $1.99.
Oh, I started laughing at one point during the show, and this was why, because as soon as we start talking about it, I just saw GP Glazer pop up, and I respect the fuck.
This dude, when it's all said and done, we're going to look back in like 3 years, and this dude will have given us like $1,000 total just to say that George Pickens is winning offensive player. Just in small increments, he's just going to keep doing it. I respect the grind, man. I respect the hustle. If he ever does, I will shout you out in a video because this is the most dedication I've ever seen. Not like in a full dedicated video, but like I'll mention you because this is crazy. Watch the dedication here. Omega Recon with $4.99 said Joe Shane gave Daniel Jones an extension and let Barkley walk to the Eagles. The fact he is still there is clownery of the highest order. Don't disagree.
Yeah, very fair.
He had a good draft this past year, but it probably doesn't make up for mainly the Jones extension is fucking crazy.
You could let Barkley walk and say what you will about that, but the fact that they did both is it's unforgivable.
It's real bad. Alex with $4.99 said, I'm working for 19 hours at a Dayton bar event tomorrow. #Go Flyers. Wish me luck, boys. Also, how many Tuck Rule related debates have you both had? Pat and I haven't had any Tuck Rule debates because
talk about it.
Pat doesn't like to talk about it, but also that happened when we were both just wee lads and A, didn't know each other, and B, were barely conscious enough to know what football was. So while looking back, yes, that's still something we could absolutely argue about. Just now, it hasn't really come up. Maybe if we were... Fuck you. All right. Bucko with another 10 pounds said, do you think the NFL expands from 32 teams in the future? Yeah, I mean, more
yes,
money.
No doubt.
If so, where do you think the expansion teams will be, as it'll be too much for Europe/US teams to fly over the Atlantic each week? Yeah, that's totally fair. Mexico is a big one. I think Mexico City.
Very, very viable.
Yep, I think I've heard that one rumored quite a bit. And then...
You got to look at like a place like St. Louis that had one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think like Canada would be tough because it's so fucking cold up there. I mean, maybe if you just dome it, you'd be fine. I mean, the NBA obviously has Canadian teams, the MLB has Canadian teams. So if you want to get some dome, maybe you do a Canadian team. But I don't know.
Yeah, I could see like a Toronto or even like a Vancouver. Because they do like the old CFL up there, they've got some. Yeah. And then again, you look at like San Diego lost a team, Anaheim. You just look at these other sports, Portland. That would be ridiculous. But I think actually out of all the leagues, they're gonna have the hardest time expanding because like you look at the NBA, they've got like Vegas, and MLB has Nashville and Charlotte and all these good places to go, and NFL they're kind of already in those kind of weird markets.
Hartford, baby. We can support a team, I promise.
I'd go.
Gwendolyn with $4.99 said, breaking, the NFL does not want Tom Grossi to go on vacation. Hey, man, or Gwendolyn, I'm here. I can support you through the Tom Grossi vacation. He's another content creator.
I know who Tom Rossi is. I just don't understand the rest. Is he on vacation?
He's on vacation. Yeah, he's dropping content like the entire time though. I saw him say he's got like 10 videos fucking scheduled to go out. But I understand the sentiment. Lucian with $2 said, will you two do a mock draft of the first round? Probably, yeah. As we get closer, we got a total of like 3 picks right, maybe for the entire first round. Well, that might be generous, but we'll do it.
Was awful. 2 years ago, I think we got 2 correct, and then nothing else. And last year, I think we got a few stragglers outside of the top picks.
This year will be interesting because it's so different with it not being a quarterback-heavy draft. I'm wondering if we'll get more or less right because of that. Probably.
I'd guess less. I would guess less, personally.
Probably less. Probably less.
Yeah, which is almost impossible.
Lily with $4.99, who also, thank you very much for the graphic you made.
Yeah,
Pat
Lily,
and I's upset picks.
unlike Bran, like when Bran made the sizzle reel for the beginning, just decided at my peak pre-Ozempic obesity days to use that video.
I'll make an updated one.
And Lily had the courtesy to use one of my slightly less obese Ozempic days in that graphic, and I was bald too, so that was very current. I appreciated that.
Listen, I'll work on it. Lily made those graphics and said, I missed a good chunk of the pod. Did we decide on a tiebreaker for the upset draft? 1-1 for you both. Yes, I win because
he's in charge.
It's my channel.
Yeah,
That's about it.
I am but a cog in the machine that doesn't work that well to begin with.
You're a very sexy cog, though.
Would you get out of here? What is going on? Waxack!
Gwendolyn with $4.99 said, I could see Jordan Travis as a pivot, no playing. Oh, God, this is, I'm not sure what this is saying. I see Jordan Travis as pivot, no playing jobs before his rookie contract ends.
Thank you for the $4.99.
Agreed. Lucia with $2 said it might have been a fumble. Tom Brady. No, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
All right, general chat. We got some. We'll answer some of your questions real quick. Jeremy says, "Is Detroit a top 5 sports city?" I don't know.
I mean, the Red Wings won a lot back in like the 1800s or something.
If we're strictly talking about quality of teams, probably not. The Pistons are getting good again. The Lions are obviously very good. The Tigers are pretty ass, correct, Pat?
Oh, we're talking right now.
This is just how I'm talking about it.
Tigers made the fucking playoffs last year out of nowhere.
Oh, God.
But are they going to be like a perennial contender? I don't know. But again, that's a very winnable baseball Thursday opening day. Baseball questions, drop them in right now.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a wide open division. There's going to be like 4 really solid teams in that division, so no reason to believe the Tigers won't.
Oh, let me hammer this guy real quick. Blueberry said, "Are you a bandwagon? I mean, you're a fan of the Patriots and the Nuggets, so."
Oh boy, whoo boy,
sir. If I am outwardly still parading myself as a Patriots fan, does that strike you as a bandwagon? I understand they haven't been bad for long, but if would a bandwagon fan stick by a team when they've been ass for the last 5 seasons? No. Yeah. They would jump off that bandwagon immediately, and I would be surrounded by, if not Bucks gear, Chiefs gear. No, I am just very blessed and lucky that my random amalgamation of teams have all won championships now in my lifetime, but I have evidence for all of them going back to childhood. I have pictures of me being a fat little fuck in jerseys of all of these teams. So, no, you will not accuse me of bandwagoning. Yes, my teams are weird combinations, but I was in the mud with not the Patriots. The Patriots mud is new, but I was in the mud with the Nuggets in the Danilo Gallinari, Ty Lawson, Timofey Mozgov, Wilson Chandler days, Tyler Lydon draft pick that made me want to actually play in traffic. Yes, I've been through it all, and the Nuggets finally won a title to reward me for all of that. But overall, as a sports fan, I am very spoiled and will absolutely admit that, especially with UConn adding to it.
Go UConn.
Omega Recon with 199 said, "Who will have the crazy Falcons type pick this year?" My immediate thought is no one, because there's just not a pick that can really be made that would be that crazy. We don't see that kind of pick every year.
The Raiders.
Fuck. Who are the Raiders going to take? They're just going to take
they're going to take
the
8th ranked safety on Mel Kiper's big board at the 6th pick overall.
Let's see. Alex said, if you had to guess which city that currently has an NFL team will be the first to have a team leave, only to be handed an expansion team. We'll go off the first part there. First NFL team that would be the first to have a team leave. Man, I don't know if any places.
A lot of them have left recent, like the Rams, the Chargers, the Raiders. Those were the obvious ones. I feel like Carolina's pretty safe in Charlotte. They've kind of got that market locked down. Maybe like Jacksonville, just because.
Yeah, I think they're going to build a new stadium though. That's the thing. That's the thing.
The context there matters. Yeah,
they've been linked to London and all that, but they're building a new stadium, and their owner is one of the richest owners. So I don't know. I don't think any leave. If I had to pick,
because you look at the small market Green Bay. Those fans are arguably the most devoted fans in the entire. They own stock in the team. So if you look at the small markets like that, they're not going anywhere. So there's no obvious screamer like the Rays, for example, in MLB.
Yeah. Jeremy said, "Are you a Taylor Swift fan?" No. CD said, "Kenneth Fareed." Yes.
Yes.
And then Alex, I think
We'll
this
just
is
answer yes or no to everything now.
Alex, I think this is in relation to who's going to have the Falcons type pick. He said somebody will go gaga for Jackson Dart. That's probably true. Somebody will reach for him. I don't know that we'll view that as
Falcons
crazy.
again.
I don't know that we'll view that as insane unless it's like a similar situation, a team with very clearly a quarterback that is like already entrenched, and then they draft him. But like otherwise, if it's a quarterback needy team, I won't be surprised regardless of where Dart goes in the first round. We'll do a couple more questions here. We'll just say two more before we hop off. Pat, I'll actually let you answer this one because even though it's directed at me, but Bran, who you got winning the World Series, and will my Yankees do well this year? I think the Yankees will be good. They're a playoff team, obviously, but I don't know if World Series return is in the cards.
They are going through it injury wise. If they can kind of keep their heads above water through April, May, and get some of these pitchers in particular back, like I think they'll make the playoffs. Like that division, like in theory, all 5 of those teams could be good, but they could. There's an avenue where they could all be very bad. The Orioles aren't going to be very bad, but they may not. Reach expectations. The Dodgers are going to win the fucking World Series, and if they don't, they should be publicly like they should have a parade.
If they don't,
people
it's because
throw
the
eggs
team
at
plane
them.
crashed. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
That is how high, I could not recall a team having that high of expectations in MLB than the Dodgers, and it's completely justified.
Yeah. All right, last one. Bailey asked, why do we not get college coaches as head coaches in the NFL as of late? Did Urban and Rule leave bad taste in teams' mouths? I remember all the Lincoln Riley to the NFL stuff.
I just think that part of it is there's not a ton of super appealing guys. Like, I think Marcus Freeman will now be the hottest name in the next coming years, but there aren't a lot of like Nick Sabans or Steve Spurriers to jump up and give it a try. And Bobby Petrino, hello, Bobby Petrino and his neck brace. But there's just not a ton of these guys, and I think Jim Harbaugh did well, and we'll see him. We've seen him do well again on the second try. But I also think from a security standpoint, it's like, do these guys want to?
I think that's the biggest part. Yeah,
jump and leave. Like Lincoln Riley is getting the house at USC. Does he want to go and suck for, have a shitty team and wherever for 2 years just to kind of be in limbo again where now he's not going to get quite as good of a job? Because of what he did, like Matt Rule, for example, who's now in Nebraska. I mean, he was at Baylor. But yeah, it's just, I just don't think there's... I just don't think they're like every year it's like Matt Campbell from Iowa State that always gets an interview, and it's just like, why?
Yeah. I think the money isn't that much better in the NFL than it is in college, especially when you are a high end high end college football coach, and then you're kind of becoming a quote unquote low end NFL coach. It was different with Harbaugh. I think he's getting paid pretty well. He's getting paid $16 million a year, but like he had proven success at the NFL level. Like I just looked up highest paid college football coach. So you've got Kirby Smart making $13 million a year. You've got Dabo Swinney making $11 million a year. The highest paid NFL coach is Andy Reid making $20 million a year. And like, yes, that's more, but A, you're not going to step in and be the highest paid NFL coach. So you're looking at sort of a moderate pay raise at best. And if you are a really, really successful college football coach, which is the ones that NFL teams would want, like your incentive for leaving is just not that high. The only reason you would is if you want the challenge of coaching in the NFL. But like there is a bit of a risk there too, of like
huge risk.
It's like it's huge, and it's not because I think you would be welcomed back with open arms to college football immediately, but it would probably be at a different school. So if you're comfortable where you're at, don't leave. And I think a lot of these guys are. Marcus Freeman is the one that popped up for the Bears because he's the new guy. So I think they were kind of gauging interest of like, hey man, are you happy in college football or not? Like there's a reason you don't see rumors about Kirby Smart or Dabo Swinney or I guess you did see a little of Steve Sarkisian this year, but not much. Like you don't see a lot of rumors of these guys because they probably said and made it very clear to the NFL, we're good. So I think that's why you need to you can't strictly incentivize them with money. You just have to kind of if we're going to get one, it's going to strictly be kind of random because it's just a coach that wants to and has enough of a pedigree for teams to be interested. It's not like the NFL's not going to poach a college coach from fucking UConn to come be their head coach or anything like they're aiming for the Georgias and the Texases, and for good reason. Those are the coaches that are probably the least interested in going up.
Deion Sanders.
Yeah, that's right, Deion Sanders.
Yeah,
but like
whoops,
that,
thank
that's
you.
Another,
Somebody
but
mentioned that in chat.
But that's another one though that like has NFL ties already, and like has like was a very high level NFL player, and again a perfect example of a guy that we think wants to because Deion likes attention. Maybe not as aggressively likes attention as how we talk about Aaron Rodgers and guys like that, but he's certainly not shy about the spotlight. But yeah, in general, I think it's not gonna happen too often. I think once in a while, but that'll be it. All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next time.
I'm about to shit my pants.